Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, party squirrels. How are you guys doing? Happy to see y'all here for another episode here of Casey Anthony. Shout out to Flash Fan. Hope you're doing well. Also, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this morning I did have a live stream. It's not long at all. It's like 40 minutes or something, but it was about the similarities between Delphi and Karen Reed. And then I ended up kind of bringing in some similarities with this case as well. But really kind of going with this whole theme, and it wasn't, I didn't anticipate this because I started covering this trial before, Richard Allen went to trial, right? But this whole idea of, did the jury get it wrong? Does the jury get it wrong? What happens when we feel like a jury gets it wrong? And why might they have gotten it wrong? Things like that, right? And I know a lot of people have sort of been kind of feeling like they've lost faith in the justice system with verdicts or lack thereof for Karen Reed and then Richard Allen's guilty verdict. And a lot of people that feel that way about Casey Anthony being acquitted. So I highly recommend checking that live stream out at some point too, if you missed it, because I think that it's pretty enlightening what some of the things that I pointed out in there, and it has to do with the jury instructions. And I think that you might realize that, how can I say this? Like, maybe it's not really the jury's fault. Like, anyway, I break it down and kind of show, try to highlight and show how that this could be a bigger concern than maybe we thought. Or knew, right, in terms of the jury instructions. And it really has all to do with reasonable doubt. But I do think you'll find it fascinating and hopefully helpful too. So, and the reason I'm mentioning it is because it was still processing last I checked on YouTube, which is weird because I don't know why it's taking so long. Whenever a live stream finishes, right, they have to like process it on YouTube, and sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes 10 hours. This one's taking longer than that, even though it's not a long live stream. And so I don't even know if people can even like watch it. I really don't know, like, if it's even available to be watched. But anyway, definitely worth checking out, and hopefully it'll be done processing soon if it's not already. Were you modding for the Jose Ibarra trial? Mod on 3 channels, that's a lot from my understanding. So yeah, and actually I need, I also, for anyone who missed it, I did finish covering all of the newest documents out of Idaho. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to double check and make sure there are any new case filings because, or court filings, because we should be expecting some things coming here in response to that last slew of motions here. So just want to make sure while I'm thinking about it, that there's not anything else. Nope, nothing else new. All right, cool. So the plan for today, though, we're going to go through this investigative report. This is written by none other than Yuri Melich. You might remember him. He testified early on in the trial. He interrogated Casey at Universal Studios. So this is their entire report after they've completed their investigation. As you can see, there's this is going to be really interesting. And I think this is like what they put together, subsequent to maybe like the charging, like the information. I'm trying to remember if she was actually indicted or if there was an information. Let me see if I can, because I don't know if that will be in here or not. Let me see. I feel like she was not indicted by a grand jury. No, she was. Okay, she was indicted. All right. she was indicted. Now, at first, of course, she wasn't when they first just detained her for the false statements or whatnot. But what's the crazy topics? I mean, I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I'm not sure. Like, I saw some of the video of him lurking. That was creepy. Really creepy. I have to say, I was really, oh, it's interesting that you say that. And here's what I mean. Because the thing is that as soon as, I remember when Lake and Riley went missing. And as soon as, they announced that there was a suspect, and then as soon as they said that this person was like, an illegal immigrant or whatever, I was like, why? Because in my mind, it's like, that people who, oh God, I hate that. I'm like, why? Because anybody who wants to take a political stand now can use this as an excuse, basically. And it just, I don't blame you, because I'm not a fan of that whole thing with politics, for sure. It's a shame, I think. So, and of course, people that want to say, and I've seen people say this, right? It was the same thing with Rachel Morin, because she was killed by an illegal immigrant, and it was the same thing, right? When that came out with that, it was, the suspect's an illegal immigrant. I was like, God, why? Because that people who want to take a stand against that are going to now use that to say that illegal immigrants are murderers, right? When 99.9% of violent homicides in the US, if I had to, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but if I had to ask, looking at the cases that we see, right? The 99% of them, right, are done by American citizens. So anyway, okay. So, but yes, Casey Anthony was indicted. All right. So Yuri Melich. So this is his investigative report. What's funny here is that this is, the Orange County Sheriff's Office is on Colonial Drive. I live on Colonial Drive, different Colonial Drive, different state, but yes. Okay, so original offense, death investigation, offense changed to first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, providing false information to law enforcement, ×4. Date of occurrence, June 16th to July 16th. So that's referencing the last day that Caylee was seen, and then to the day that she was reported missing. Time of occurrence unknown, and there's their address. And there's her mugshot. She's 1 year older than me. Just crazy. I always keep thinking she's older than that, like older than me than that. But yeah. Okay. Victim information, Caylee Anthony, cute picture, August 9th, 2005. And then there's Cindy and George. So here's all of the detectives involved. So, and we're going to go through this list because we should be expecting these people to all testify more than likely. So Yuri Melich, lead investigator, check. We heard from him. Sergeant John Allen. We have not heard from him yet. Commander Matt Irwin. I don't know that we would hear from him. He just assisted with witness interviews, but we have not heard from him. Detective Kevin Stinger. We heard from him on the last episode. He was the one with the really prominent mustache. Detective Sandra Kahn. We did not hear from her, although I feel like maybe she got married and her last name changed, because I know we did hear from a female who assisted with the collecting of the electronic stuff. So maybe she got married. Detective Corporal William Eric Edwards. We've not heard from him. Detective Corporal Susan Carver. Nope. Appling Wells. I hope we hear from him, because he was one of the other detectives who had interrogated Casey, and he was the one that had a very different perspective than the other two. And if you recall from the video jail calls, Caylee actually says that this was the one detective who she thought was actually listening to her and she would be willing to talk to again, like voluntarily. And he had a much different attitude. I really liked him, actually. I felt like that was way more in line with what I feel like is more fair if you're going to be quote unquote interrogating. And what I mean by that is it's not really interrogating. It was really more just talking with her, like as a human, you know? Anyway, let's see here. Charity Beasley, we've heard from. That's interesting. Look at this. Detective Samra Melich. Is that Yuri's wife? It's got to be. How many last names of Melich are there? Wow. That seems like a conflict of interest, though, to me, that they would be on the same case. Anyway. And then Sergeant Reggie Hosey, we heard from him. He was one early on in the trial. We heard from Brendan Fletcher. We heard from Adriana Acevedo. These are the first responders after the 911 call. So this is just introducing all the people involved. And then we have the FBI. Shout out to Special Agent Nick Savage, Special Agent Scott Bowen, and Special Agent Steve McEllier. FBI agents assigned to this investigation. The FBI. And then we have the FDLE. They assisted in compiling cell phone records. Now we have the forensic unit. You know, you can really see kind of what a production it is to put, you know what I mean? Like all the different departments, just even, right? Now we have the forensic unit, and there's a lot of people involved in the forensic. So someone compared Shauna Gardner to Casey Anthony today. Someone said 2 cases involved kids. Wait, Shauna Gardner, she didn't kill the kids. Wait, what? There was nothing that happened to her kids, right? That I know of. It was just the husband, right? Very weird. Okay, so we've heard from Gerardo Bloisy like already 50,000 times. We'll probably hear from him again. Wouldn't be surprised. Michael Vincent, we've heard from. We've not heard from Melina Burrows. We have heard from Christine Narkowitz. Karen Lowe, that was the hair lady. She did the hair. We heard from her. We've not heard from Dr. Thiessen. And we did hear from Dr. Rickenbach. He was the one who really loved chemistry. Oh, and there we have Arpad Voss and his sidekick, Dr. Michael Sigmund. Apparently, Dr. Arpad Voss is still doing this thing. He's still doing this. He's still here in Tennessee. Well, they're in Tennessee, doing the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, doing the body farm, doing all that still. Because I heard someone just talk about him the other day. Someone in law enforcement on a live stream was referencing Dr. Voss. And I was like, no, I couldn't believe it because I never hear his name come up. I mean, I never had heard of him apart from this trial, but it was really funny that he was mentioned. And the way he was mentioned was because the body farm thing came up. And I'm like, oh my God, the body farm. Because again, in my mind, I'm like, you hear about that so much in this trial specifically. But I didn't expect his name to come up. And then people started talking about him. And I was like, oh my God. And then Dr. Michael Sigmund, his sidekick. Oh, we have a childhood friend of Casey Anthony. She has not testified, which is interesting. That is very interesting. A childhood friend of Casey Anthony, and she has not testified. I wonder if the defense is going to call her. And so here's what my plan is. Let me just see. Can I edit this? Let me just see here. What I want to be able to do, here's my plan. Okay. I want to be able to highlight it. I think I can highlight it now, though, if I tried to. Okay, because here's what I'm going to do. Here's the plan. So can I just get rid of this? All right, yeah, cool. So here's the plan. So I have this pulled up. So this is the whole thing. Is this is outlining their case against her, right? So I have this ready to go. So what my plan is to, as we go along, what we're going to do together is we're going to pick out what did they build their case on, right? Because this is their entire investigative report. This is the entire outline of the state's case, right? And we're going to go through it step by step. And anytime that there's something in the investigative report that is like, yep, that's something that they're, that's part of their case against her, right? They believe it's evidence against her, right? Whether it is or isn't, it's like they believe it is, right? We're going to take a look, and then I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to add it to this list. That's sort of the plan. People are weird. I agree. Oh, you mean one of the children? Or you mean our pod boss? I mean, the air samples. I don't think that's ever been done again. I think that was a one and done situation. And I don't know how that made it past any Dauber or Fry hearings, to be honest. I really don't. Oh, wait. Well, I guess I do. Judge Belvin. That's how. Okay. Yeah, he was a terrible witness. I don't think he'd I mean, well, it was clear he didn't testify a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that other people would be inspired to call him as a witness after his performance, if you will, in this trial. Okay, so background detail. So on July 15th, Sergeant Reggie Hosey notified me about a report of a missing child. The child was later identified as Caylee Anthony. The initial report indicated the child was last seen at 2863 South Conway Road around apartment 210. According to the child's mother, Casey Anthony, the child was left with a babysitter named Zenaida Gonzalez at the above South Conway Road address. Since June 9th, Casey claims she's not been able to locate Zenaida or her child. She never reported the missing child to law enforcement. Cindy, right, her mom, reported this after the child had not been seen for over a month. Cynthia found Casey and brought her home after the car Casey was driving was found abandoned and towed on June 30th. Corporal, see, that says Brendan. In the trial, it sounds like they say Brendan, but maybe the B isn't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they say Rendon and it sounds like Brendan. Who knows? Although, having said that, if he was being questioned by Miss Drain Burdick, she gets everybody's name wrong, and that could be part of why I thought it was Brendan. I'm going to say Rendon, though, since that's what it says here. So Corporal Rendon Fletcher and Deputy Adriana Acevedo had gone to South Carolina Road address and met with management, who told them the apartment Casey showed them had been vacant for 142 days. Being the on-call missing persons investigator, I was notified of this incident and asked to respond. After briefing my supervisor, Sergeant John Allen, I responded to 4937 Hope Springs Drive. And Sergeant John Allen, again, we have not heard from him yet, but he was one of the other detectives who interrogated Casey at Universal Studios, and he was the one who was especially aggressive. He was very aggressive. All the times that I pointed out when there were things like, you're a horrible, callous monster and all that type of nonsense. Most of the time that was John Allen. Some of the time it was Yuri Melich, but John Allen also was the one that kept interrupting her. He would ask her a question and she would start to answer and he would interrupt her. And I pointed all of that out when we listened to it because it really bothered me. And for enough, in a number of ways, I was like, this is not as effective as it could be, even if you want to actually get information, anyway. So he was the one that was more aggressive. I first met with Casey inside the residence and spoke with her alone and away from other family members. Before asking for a recorded statement, I reviewed her original 4-page written sworn statement and asked if this was her version of what happened, and she said it was. I told her that the incident was very suspicious and her version suspect. I gave her an opportunity to tell me something different, but she claimed her written version was true and accurate. I then conducted a recorded interview of Casey. So this, we've heard these early on in the trial. So I'm not going to read, whenever they include the transcript, I'm not going to read all of that because we've heard it. During our interview, Casey said she lived at this address on Hope Spring Drive until June 9th, 2008. On June 9th, she left work to go to university. So this is the part where she gets the date wrong. She thinks that Caylee went missing on the 9th, even though we know it was actually like the 15th. When en route to work, she says she stopped by 2863 Conway Road, met with Zenaida Gonzalez, who babysits Caylee. She left Caylee with Zenaida at the stairwell to that building that leads to the apartment 210. She says she's known Zenaida for 4 years, and Zenaida has watched Caylee for the past 1.5 years. Casey left work around 1700 hours and came to pick up Caylee. She says she got no answer at the door. She tried calling Zenaida's phone, number unknown, and got no answer. She then started going to places that Zenaida was known to frequent, but didn't locate either of them. Casey said she was, quote, pacing and worrying. Interesting that they put that in italics. That is interesting. You know, what's funny, I'm remembering too from the testimony that Mr. Baez actually was referencing this report. You know, and now, oh my God, it's all making sense, right? So, you know, whenever they're like, oh, you put in your report, you know, we hear that all the time in every trial, right? You put this in your report. But what's interesting is like when it comes to Yuri Melich, the report they're referencing is this. And we don't usually ever see the reports that they're talking about in trials, right? This is the report. And so what made me think of that is that I was remembering how Mr. Baez actually says, like, so you put in your report, you put these things in quotes, or you put these things in italics, and he would ask him things like, does that mean you found these things especially important or whatever? Or does this mean that you were quoting her verbatim, stuff like that? Because one of the things he was saying or asking Mr. Baez, was that he didn't follow up on this part here, that he put safe in quotes in italics, but he didn't follow up with her on as to why she felt safe not at her parents' house. Some people are saying, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really care. People are just dumb. Yeah. He got lucky. It's so crazy that people say that because that makes literally no sense. Okay, so Casey said she was pacing and worrying and went to her boyfriend's house where she felt safe. She identified her boyfriend as Anthony Lazaro. Since June 9th, Casey says she's done her own investigation in trying to find her daughter. She claims she's gone to clubs Zenaida is known to frequent in hopes of seeing her or her daughter. She never called the police to report her child's disappearance. Casey said she's seen movies and reports of missing people getting hurt if the police got involved. She only called tonight after her mother confronted her with the whereabouts of the child and Casey's version of events. Casey had said she told 2 people about the missing child, both her coworkers at Universal Studios. Entering, right, Jeff Hopkins and Juliette Lewis. She identified them as none other than Jeffrey Hopkins and Juliette Lewis. She said that they could confirm her story. When I asked for their phone numbers, she said she didn't have them. Casey indicated she lost a phone at Universal. That phone had their numbers as well as Zenaida, and then here's from her interview. Now, remember, just to reference everybody or remind everybody that when Lee Anthony visits Casey at the jail, right? This is part of the major gaslighting that was going on, because he shows up there, right, after she's already in custody. And he's like, yeah, guess what? I found them. I found Juliette Lewis and I found Jeffrey Hopkins, and I know what their phone numbers are, and I'm getting in contact and all this, and it's total bullshit. And he knows it's bullshit. And it's like, it's literally the best example of gaslighting. And it's not just with her brother, it's with it's her whole family. Both her parents and her brother do that same thing. It is the best example. It's better than the movie Gaslight. Like the movie where the term comes from is called The Gaslight. Honestly, even in that movie, I would say that the Casey Anthony, like her life and family situation, is a better example than even the movie. Yeah. Well, that's totally fair that you don't want to deal with the Jose Baez trolls, Flash fan. I'm hoping to cover that trial, so, I don't have troll issues. So, you're welcome to join us here. I know that it's different when you're modding, but, there's only been, I think, once or twice maybe where someone that was kind of trolly might show up. But what I found that I love is that, like, everybody just ignores them. Like I remember, for example, there was that one live stream I did. It was on the day that we were on verdict watch, the day that the verdict came in Delphi, I did a verdict watch stream that morning, and there were a lot of people in the chat, a lot of new people. There were people that were like local to the Delphi area. It was great. It was awesome. And like, there was like one random person that popped in there and just started like spewing stuff about, you know, he's guilty because of the confessions. And the thing that I love is I didn't say anything, and everyone just ignored the person, just ignored them, and they just went away. Right. It's like, it reminds you, it's like being a kid, right? And they say, what do you do to a bully? Right. Ignore them and they go away. But there's been like maybe one other time, I think it was during Karen Reed. There was like somebody that seemed like a troll came in, and literally same thing. Everyone just ignored them and they just went away. So, pretty funny. Okay, after our interview concluded, Casey agreed to show me the last 3 known locations for Zenaida in hopes of identifying her. Casey rode with me in my unmarked car to meet with a marked unit and another deputy sheriff to attempt contact at one of these locations. We first went to the corner of Glenwood and Robinson, where she pointed out a building on the northwest corner. She pointed at a second window and said Zenaida had lived in the apartment in early 2006 when she moved into another house owned by Zenaida's mother, Gloria. Oh yeah, shout out to Gloria. The building she pointed out was later identified as 301 North Hillside Drive. Casey said the apartments were 3 stories and blah, blah. We've heard that part about the window. Oh, of course, this one, though. It belonged to Zenaida's roommate. And I don't think we ever got a name for her, Zenaida's roommate. As a note, the initial responding deputies had found a handwritten note with the address of 232 Glenwood in Casey's car prior to my arrival. This address was directly across from the building she just pointed out to me. Now, I do like how they have the pictures with like this. I do like the stylings of this in the little box. This is very organized. Well, I think it's well organized and put together, you know, so far. We then went to that place to confirm this was the same apartment that she showed the deputies earlier that night. She confirmed that it was. Oh, and there's the Sawgrass Apartments. We've been there on our field trips. We've done quite a good amount of scrolling around them parts. We went to the crossings at Conway, a townhome community near Michigan Avenue and Conway Road. This is where Zenaida's mother allegedly owned a condo, and where Casey claims she's dropped off her child several times. We rode through the complex, down every street, but Casey said she couldn't remember what the address was. We knocked at 3 different addresses, making contact with 3 different tenants, all of which did not know Zenaida or her mother, Gloria. Casey was told to let me know if anyone looked familiar as I spoke with them. Casey said no one I spoke with looked familiar to her. She said she didn't remember the exact house, claiming she stopped paying attention to which one it was since she came here so many times. There's a picture of that place. I dropped Casey off at her residence at Hope Spring, telling her I would call her if I needed anything. Prior to leaving, I was approached by her father. Well, here you go. You guys, the things that you learn, right? This is why I wanted to read this, because this did not come out at trial. Let me go back to this again. I dropped Casey off at her residence on Hope Spring, telling her I would call her if I needed anything. Prior to leaving, I was approached by her father, George, who stressed his concern that his daughter is holding back information. And you wonder where Mr. Baez maybe got the impression, even before meeting George, that potentially Casey was being thrown under the bus. But boy, it only goes downhill from here. I mean, this, like I've said in those video jail calls, things that George says to me are as good as an embedded confession as I feel like you'll ever see, and completely changed things for me in terms of his involvement being more than just sort of a theory. But this shit, though, her dad approaches the detective. So at this point, it sounds like she wasn't a suspect, right? This is before the interrogation at Universal Studios, right? So at this point, you know, they don't really think there's too much, you know, they just think, you know, she's missing. They're still trying to find her. And then good old George goes up to the lead detective and says his daughter is holding back information. I mean, so I'm going to put this on my list here. I want to be able to highlight this. Oh, perfect. Here we go. Excellent. Oh my God, why is it that color? Hold on. Let me see if I can make this better. Aha! It would be nice if they could make it like a, oh, that's not dark enough. Hold on. Can it make it a line? Hold on. I bet that's what this is. Perfect. Maybe, are you, okay. It's weird that the color changes after you finish highlighting it, but whatever. Oh, look at this. Keep reading, Chelsea. He stated he and his wife, Cynthia, Casey's mother, feared something may have happened to Caylee. So this is where Cindy joins the club, throwing her daughter under the bus. Incredible. So now what I want to be able to do is put this on my list. This is crazy. Oh my God. How is there not a way to copy and paste this? Okay, I suppose not. So we're gonna have to pivot. So all right, so one. So prior to Detective Melich, and y'all, so this is a collaborative thing too. So anything that anybody who's watching sees in the report that they think should be on this list, just let me know. We'll include it. So prior to Detective Melich, I'm leaving the Anthony. By the way, I've got a number of letters on my laptop keyboard that get stuck. So just that's what you see there. H's and B's tend to be most common. Leaving, it's not, I'm actually a good typer, but anyway. Prior to Detective Melich leaving Anthony home, George, the fact that George is the one that approached him is wild to me, right? It's not like he asked George. George approached him. Okay. George approaches him to say that he believes Casey is withholding information, and Cindy joins in to say that they fear something you know what's weird is that, like, of course you fear something. Like, this is a weird statement, right? Because at this point she's been missing for a month, and everyone's being told is that she's been kidnapped. So it's a weird thing to then say, I fear something's happened to her. It's like, well, obviously that's what's happened. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, we know something's happened to her. She's been gone for a month. Like, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. For anyone that talks about Casey's behavior being weird at this point in time, or at any point in time, my personal opinion, I think that it's not nearly as weird as her parents and maybe even her brother. Oftentimes, really, she's like, seems to be the sanest one in the family, I would say. Cindy joins in, and also maybe the least culpable. Cindy joins in to say that they fear something has happened to Caylee. I mean, again, but that's like, obviously something's happened. This coming from the lady who called 911. She calls 911 to report her missing, and then later on is like, oh, I hear something's happened to her. You see how that doesn't make any fucking sense? Okay. And what's interesting, right, is that because they don't consider these parents suspects, right? By they, I mean law enforcement, Yuri Melich, because they're not considered a suspect, his interpretation of these statements made by her parents is like, oh, Casey's the one that's sus, right? But if you were having an open mind, this would be sus. Seriously, like this would be sus. That statement made by the parents doesn't make any sense. As a note, when asked about Caylee's father, Casey could only tell me his name was Eric and that he died in a motor vehicle accident in Georgia in mid to late 2007. She claimed she had an obituary at one point, but she couldn't recall where she put it. Cynthia later confirmed this to be the same story Casey told her about the child's father. The other thing that's weird is like the fact that no one ever found out who the father was. I mean, I guess Casey might know, but it's another weirdness. I met with Sergeant John Allen and briefed him on what had transpired thus far. From there, I went to the Sawgrass Apartments and met with Dave Turner and Amanda Macklin, and we have heard from them in the trial already. Neither claimed to know any Zenaida. They were shown a photo of the missing child, Caylee, and no one recognized her. They confirmed that the apartment Casey mentioned had been vacant for a few days. Dave Turner led him into the apartment, and they confirmed it was vacant. They ran several names in their system, including Gloria Gonzalez, Jennifer Rosa, and Raquel. Oh, look at this. Farrell. Oh, right. Raquel Farrell. So that Raquel Farrell is Zanny's roommate. And found a Zenaida Gonzalez. Now, this part is really interesting. Now, this came up in the trial, and I was like, oh my God, are we going to learn more about this? We found a Zenaida Gonzalez who had come to look at an apartment on June 17th. She was never a tenant, had never done anything more than fill out a guest card. They gave me a copy of the guest card completed by Zenaida Gonzalez, which contained, this is really interesting to me. Because is this where she got the name from? Now, it says that this was on June 17th. That's interesting. Huh. Did they ever call the phone number? Because here's the thing. The testimony that we have heard in trial is that Casey had been talking about Zenaida for years, right? Before Caylee went missing. And we heard this not just from her mom, but from friends, right? So more reliable. That she'd been talking about Zenaida for years. Same with Jeff Hopkins and all the other made-up people. So in other words, initially I was thinking, well, did Casey see this name on the guest card? And then that's where she came up with the name, but that's impossible because this was on June 17th and she'd already been talking again about Zenaida apparently for years prior to that. So then that begs the question, what are the odds though? What are the odds? And that's why I'm asking myself, did they ever call this phone number? Because does this person exist? Like, is this, or was this Casey staging this, right? And filling that out and making up a phone number. They better have called that fucking phone number. And yes, she did. She did. She did originally call, she said Grand Theft Auto, which wasn't even true, right? I mean, and then she admitted to lying. That's the other thing that drives me crazy, right? She calls and she initially says Grand Theft Auto, and she also says that Casey has stolen money from them. All of that's false. All of it's false. And she says that on the first 2 911 calls. Then they show up or whatever, or then she calls to report Casey missing or Caylee. Then they show up and then she's like, they're like, oh, so what about the stolen car and stolen money? And she's basically like, yeah, no, I made that up. Again, the fact that wasn't like, oh, red flag, let's look into this lady. And instead they just are like, oh, okay, what? It doesn't track. That doesn't seem plausible to me. Like, I don't understand how you're not like, what? The hypocrisy, right? When it's like hypocrisy, to be like, Casey's lying, so therefore she's guilty, or Casey's lying and therefore she's sus and whatever, and like, meanwhile, the first lies that law enforcement is given from the family come from Cindy. So it's just crazy. It's like, but yet, and Cindy was also not charged with making false statements to law enforcement. Neither was George. Both of them made false statements to law enforcement. Yeah, I know. It's horrible. It's horrible. Yeah. Wow. Now, he did not get that type of retainer for Casey. And she ended up being declared indigent. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's what he does now. So this is all very interesting. So I'm going to add this to the list. So June 17th, guest card. It contained a phone number. Okay, let's see if I can paraphrase that for my list here. So June 17th, Zenaida. I mean, like, who is this person? Like, this is wild to me. Just making sure I spell it correctly. Gonzalez fills out a guest card, at Sawgrass Apartments, and provides a cell phone. Remember what I said about the H's? Number. That's wild. Did they not call the phone number? And why would you not then include that here? Anyway, Jesus Christ. All right. I then went to Universal Studios and met with investigator Leonard Tutora after briefing him. And then again, the whole thing. She's a liar, so therefore she's guilty. Guess who else lied? Like, not only were her parents lying from the get-go, but the way that law enforcement lied with this whole thing about bringing her to Universal. It's just crazy to me. Like, if for people who are like, Casey is guilty because she lied, if that's the premise that you're going with, then literally all of these people, for the most part, maybe only a handful of exceptions, also need to be arrested for murder and convicted, according to people, for murder, right? Same with her parents and same with her brother. Anyway, logical fallacies. Okay, so yes, so this whole thing about going to Universal, though. After briefing him while I was there, he checked several names in their database, including Zenaida Gonzalez, Juliet Lewis, and Jeffrey Hopkins, and came up with the following results. Casey was fired from Universal on 4/24/06, and she was not currently employed there. Jeffrey Hopkins, an alleged outcry witness, did work for Universal Studios, but he was fired on 5/13/02. I'm going to put these dates in my list just because this is good to have, because it was unclear in the trial so far as to exactly when Casey was fired or when Jeff was fired. And again, I wonder if these dates just weren't allowed to come in at trial, but they're here in the report. So 4/24/06. Oops. So like 2 years before Caylee goes missing. The way that I was like, oh my God, when Jeff Hopkins sat down on that witness stand, I was like, what? He exists? Crazy. It's like seeing a ghost. He was fired on 5/13/02. Wow. Okay. Juliet Lewis, another alleged outcry witness, was not found as a current or former employee of Universal Studios. And remember, again, Lee says that he did confirm that she existed and worked there. Zenaida Gonzalez, who Casey claimed was a seasonal employee, was also not found as a current or former employee. While with Leonard, I called Casey. Here we go. The big lie from law enforcement here. While with Leonard, I called Casey on my cell phone and put her on speakerphone so all could hear. Did you get her permission to do that? Probably not. Casey confirmed that she did currently work for Universal as an event coordinator. She said her office extension was blah, blah. Leonard said this was not a valid extension and even tried calling it to no avail. She said her direct supervisor was Tom Manley. Leonard indicated no Tom Manley was employed by Universal Studios. Leonard identified Tom Matson as the head of the events department. Leonard called him and confirmed they did not have Casey listed as an employee, either past or present. I asked Casey where her office was, and she claimed to have her own office. She couldn't give me the building number or location. When asked if she had her current work identification card, she said she didn't know where it was. I asked Sergeant Allen to see if he could arrange to have someone go back to the Hope Spring address and meet with Casey to see if she'd agree to come to Universal Studios. And it looks like, so Appy Wells. Okay. It looks like his full name was Appling and they call him Appy. And it's so funny because when you're hearing them talk about this detective in the testimony, it was unclear to me if they were saying Abby or Happy. I couldn't really tell. And now I know it's so Appy, but his full name, I guess, is Abling, which is a very interesting name. Yeah, they are loaded. They are loaded. That's what I've heard as well. No, that's not true. I don't know. People are so funny. But hopefully you're up to speed. There's a lot of news in the Koberger case. I covered all of it with those documents. There's a lot. There's a lot. I had 2 live streams with it. Man, we learned a whole lot. And one thing that was really interesting to learn, especially, was that he made multiple statements to law enforcement, including after he was Mirandized. He was read his rights. He agreed to talk without an attorney, and he was interrogated, and it was more than likely on video. And then at some point, he says he would like an attorney, but that shocks me that he did that. But there, yeah, I don't know where people just made stuff up. There's no plea deal. Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting information, and I'm well, to my knowledge, I think I'm the only person who's covered all of the documents. Like, I know there's been other channels who just kind of gone over a handful or done like summaries or whatever. And then of course there's like Law and Crime did, like, after, of course, I covered them right away, and then Law and Crime did like a synopsis, and like everything that was contained in their video was like factually incorrect. It was really sad because I used to like Anjanette Levy, but it was really clear to me she did not read any of the documents. And if someone else wrote the script for her, they didn't read the documents. It's just, it's disappointing. And it just makes you realize, right? It's like, this is why I read the documents. This is why I read the documents in their entirety on the air, so to speak, right? And we have the right information, and it's not just hearsay, right? Or rumor. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff that comes out in those motions, and some of it is redundant, but I skip over the redundant parts. So, okay, so yes, so Sergeant Allen, who's the aggressive one, and then Appy, who's the nice one, they went to go get Casey, and investigator Tutor agreed to assist us with trying to ascertain if it was possible. Casey worked for Universal Studios, but was not in the computer system. All right. Once at Universal Studios, I met with the 3 at the employer's entrance. Investigator Tutor was present. Casey, who didn't have her ID, explained to the security officer at the entrance she was a current employee and lost her ID. When the security guard, Steve, asked who her supervisor was, she told him it was Tom Manley. When told no Tom Manley worked there, she gave no explanation. Stuff like this is interesting, right? Because this comes up a lot. Anyway, like, this happens a lot. We've heard this in the trial, right? When he was testifying, that they would confront her with a lie and she would give no explanation. A million points to anyone who can say, why is that weird? When we think about all the times we see people who are guilty and who are lying, or just people that are just lying, right? They get caught in that liar's loop, as they say. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? And why this is odd, that her pattern is, if she's confronted with a lie, she just doesn't give an explanation oftentimes. Investigator Tutor agreed to escort Casey to where she said she worked. We followed her into a building nearby and down the building's inner hall. She walked with purpose and acted like she knew, walked with purpose. You know what's so funny is that that's exactly what they said about Richard Allen, one of the eyewitnesses. I think it was the one that was the least credible. The one whose story was a mess, but I'm pretty sure it was her, that, the man she saw was walking with a purpose. And they put that in their affidavit, the arrest warrant for him. But interesting that that's here as well. I'm going to put that on my list for that reason. But I'm going to add this to the list as well, because I do think that's interesting. I need to highlight it. Okay. I do find that interesting. I'm curious what you guys think about that. All right. Now, so confronted with lies and gives no further explanation. She just doesn't say anything. Again, I'm so curious, what do you guys think about that? Does something seem weird to you about that compared to what we usually see, right? And then the other thing was, what was it? Yes. This is crazy that this is in this document, right? What are the odds? Crazy. She walked with purpose. Incredible that this is in here. I just don't even know. Wow. And acted like she knew where she was going. Halfway down this hall, she stopped, turned, and told us she hadn't told us the truth, and she was not a current employee. So then she finally, says, yeah, I'm not a current employee. Now they're going to have a diagram. This came in the trial with this arrow. I remember that. And then they found a small conference room to talk to her. By talk, he means interrogate. This conversation, by conversation, he means interrogation, was also recorded. Prior to beginning this interview, we stressed that the door was unlocked and we were in the room for privacy only. She understood and agreed to speak with us on tape. In short, Caylee was confronted with all the inconsistencies in her story and the fact that I had proven that she lied. This right here to me sounds like this is the basis for them first. Like, this is, in terms of them being like, okay, she's a suspect. This sounds like this is where the to quote Michael Scott from The Office, right? The turntables have turned. I feel like here. This is where I think it changes. And I think part of it is this part. Look at the language here. This is the first time that he really refers to himself in the first person, I believe, which is interesting. I don't think so. There's been we, I guess there's an I here, but there's been very little of that. It's interesting here that Yuri Melich says, I had proven she had lied. And, with all that we've learned about her family dynamics, I don't think she even, my whole interpretation is different in that I don't think she was actually lying. I think she was gaslit. And that's completely different. Like, I don't think she was thinking she lied. I think she had been her family had created this false reality and been perpetuating it. And again, we see that even in the video jail calls. But to him, he's like, haha, look at me. I win. I proved that you lied. It's like, okay. So, all right, let's add this to, so during the interrogation, according to Detective Melich, he confronted Caylee with inconsistencies, and I want to put this, and proved that she lied. I'll put it in quotes, actually. Actually, if I need to do that, I'm going to do it verbatim, because that shit matters to me. Had proven that she lied. Put it, because I don't put things in quotes unless it's verbatim. Okay. Excellent. She admitted she lied to me about the apartment and being one of Zenaida's. She admitted her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo Morales, lived across the street from the residence. And though she had stayed there occasionally since the child went missing, she never mentioned this address or the name to us. So she just didn't mention Ricardo Morales. Now, I don't understand why the fuck that matters, but clearly he thinks this is suspect, which, boy, that, like, wild, right? That's terrifying. That's terrifying. This is why I wanted to go over this, because this is the basis of them freaking charging her or arresting her and charging her. This is the reason she was zeroed in on and included in here. Like, the fact that he includes this, right? He didn't have to include this. He included this. She admitted her ex-boyfriend lived across the street from the residence, and though she had stayed there, she never mentioned the address or the name to us. Gotta be fucking kidding me. So that's not even giving false information. It's just she didn't mention something. Sad. Caylee failed to mention Ricardo. I mean, it's her ex-boyfriend. This is wild. All right, that's what I need to do is I need to I need to make, this is a turning point here at number 6. This is where it turns, I think. Because I feel like at this point, from the tone in this report, after Detective Melich is like, haha, I proved that you lied. It's like, he's now like, you're a suspect in his mind, right? So maybe what I will do is change the color. What color should we do? I don't want it to be hard to see. That's kind of, is that bad looking? Ew, that is a horrible color. Ew, nasty. I don't know, that kind of hurts the eyes. What color should I do? Y'all let me know. Help me pick a color. Like I have the colors. What is this? It's like a red. Ew, too bright. It has to match the theme. I mean, it doesn't have to, but I like doing those types of things. Well, we'll go with that for right now. We can always change it. Because look at, so this is, oh wow, still on the first page. So like that's the colors, like that's, and the reason is because these are like the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Like, I guess really they're gray and yellow, but the yellow would be impossible to see. So I went with orange and gray, and also because orange is kind of the theme of the thumbnails and stuff. And the reason being Orange County, right? So in case anyone was wondering, if you look at like the font and the colors in the thumbnails, there's a lot of orange because Orange County. And so that's why I went with this, but I wanted it to be visible looking. Oh, that's right. I forgot about your being vision impaired. That's too bad. I would have loved your input. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think we can do better. Let me see if I can find a better color. Right. Let's see. I'm an overachiever, guys. It's the violinist in me. It's in my nature. I cannot help it. Needs to go with the color theme. That's like a blue gray. See, I don't know if that's different enough. I know that no one watching right now, I don't think, can see the colors. Let's see here. Dark green. Oh gosh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I'm gonna leave it with that for now. All right. So Casey failed to mention Ricardo Morales. She admitted she lied to being employed at Universal, claiming she thought that she may happen to find out if her child, Caylee or Zenaida, had visited Universal Studios since June 9th. She admitted that she should have called the police the day the child went missing, and in not doing so, she failed to provide the victim with the care, supervision, and services needed to maintain. So this part right here, I think, is how they have the grounds for anything to charge her with in terms of the child, like this part. And this is only because they bully her into it, right? Like, because, you might find yourself wondering, as I'm sure the jury did and acquitted her of it, one of the things she was charged with was like the child neglect, right? And it's like child neglect. And it's because of this statement right here. This is how you know the case is weak. The state has no case, because I don't think that the state even really believes that she was neglected her child. Like, I don't think that they even believe that. However, it's because she made this statement in this interrogation where she admitted that she should have called the police the day the child went missing. And in not doing so, she failed to provide the victim with care, supervision, and services necessary to maintain the child's physical or mental health. Now, that's not exactly verbatim what happens in that interrogation. That all those words aren't used. It's really more like she just admits that she should have called earlier or something like that, and that it could have been helpful to Caylee. He included. This is so fishy, man, because that's not what she says. She does not say all of that. She doesn't agree to all that. He's including that because that, I guarantee you, is the statute necessary for the charge, one of the charges. But again, I don't even think the state fully believes in the charge at all. It's wild to me, because we heard witness after witness after witness. There's been not a single witness in this entire trial that has said anything other than she was a phenomenal mom and a great mom to Caylee, and took great care of her and all of that. And like literally until she went missing, this was the most loved, taken care of child ever. The only thing to contradict that is this statement made during an interrogation, which it wasn't even exactly this. Again, she just said something like, yeah, she conceded that she should have called sooner, something like that. She was really just being agreeable at that point to them. It wasn't like she actually, anyway. But again, this needs to go on the list because this would be an admission against interest, right, as well, and part of the grounds for the charge. So admitted she should have called the police. I'm just going to paraphrase it here. Casey admitted she should have called the police sooner, and in doing so, failed to provide Caylee with the necessary care. And I'll put this in brackets here. This is the basis for the, and I want to make sure I get the name of the exact charge correct because that's the person I am. So it is aggravated child abuse. Wow. Wow. That's creative, isn't it? Fucking hell. Wow. Not even neglect. Aggravated child abuse. Amazing. How do they, that's really creative that they go from this to that, right? Wow. Basis for the aggravated child abuse charge. You know, I think this color is okay. It's growing on me. Okay. Casey still maintained that the last she saw her daughter was with Zenaida on June 9th. It should be noted that at no time during any of the above interviews did Casey show any of. I'm going to smash something. No, I'm not. I've never smashed anything in my life. It's just this makes me want to. It should be noted that at no time during any of the above interviews did Casey show any obvious emotion as to the loss of her child. The fact that this is in the report. You guys, how scary is this? Again, everything that's in here is the basis for them being like, yep, she's guilty. Lock her up, boys, charge her with murder and seek the death penalty, okay? Oh, okay. Well, Flash fan, I'm glad you let me know that you have a hard time seeing, because luckily, so I'm glad to know, because I do read everything, and sometimes I wonder if it, I'm glad to know that it's worth it, right? And because I read everything that's on here. So even if you can't read it, I'm reading it. So this is so let me read this part again. It should be noted that at no time during any of the above interviews did Casey show any obvious emotion as to the loss of her child. Again, this is in the investigative report. Then this is it's just you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because how many other times do we see things where somebody is as a suspect and they're being interrogated, or they're on body cam, or they're maybe testifying at their trial, whatever the case may be, and it's too much emotion. It's not believable because it's too much emotion, or it's the wrong kind of emotion. Or in this case, no obvious emotion. There's no emotion. It's not the inappropriate emotion, it's just no emotion. But the fact that you're judging it in the first place, I want to quote this verbatim and put it on my list. Let me see if I can memorize it. It should be noted that at no time during any of the above interviews did Casey show any obvious. Okay, let's see how I do. All right. This is the memory test. It should be noted that crap. I forget. Was it any or none? Hold on. No time during any. Okay, hold on. Should be noted that no time during any of the above interviews did Casey show any obvious emotion. I failed the memory test. I was close. Any obvious emotion as to the loss of her child. Okay, close. As to the loss of her child. Again, lock her up, boys. She's guilty. And you know what? again, the people that are in the Casey's the worst mom and she's guilty camp, that Casey Anthony did it, Casey Anthony's evil. This right here, the lack of emotion, I think, is the number one thing that and I've asked people why. Because I'm curious when people say, and the people that say they think that they still feel like she's guilty or whatever, this is what they say. They're like, yeah, she didn't show any emotion or something along those lines. Right. And it's one thing for lay people in the general public to be judgmental like that. And while I don't think it's accurate or appropriate or fair or anything, it's one thing if it's just the general public and but it's another thing when law enforcement, right, jumps to those conclusions or draws inferences from it. And this is why it's problematic. Oh, keep reading, Chelsea. She did not cry or give any indication that she's fuck me. She did not cry or give any legitimate indication that she's legitimately worried about her child's safety. Oh my God, this makes me so mad. I'll read it again without interrupting myself. She did not cry or give any indication that she was legitimately worried about her child's safety. Okay, I'm typing it up. She did not cry or give any indication that she was legitimately worried about her child's safety. It's not okay. That's all. It's just not okay, people. It's not okay. We need to end this cycle of being judgmental. Why does it look like that? Judgmental, horrible people. Like, let's not, please. Okay. While Casey was with Detective Wells, I called the Zenaida. Oh, here we go. This is what I was wondering, right? When I was like, oh, did they call the phone number? Here we go. This has not come up in trial. What happened here? Okay. This is news. I called the Zenaida Gonzalez, identified from the Sawgrass Apartments. She was open and responsive, and when asked, denied knowing. So she really existed. This is wild. So what this means is that Casey did not write that on the card. That was not her. This is a coincidence because she had already been talking about Zenaida Gonzalez and then an actual person with that name. I mean, I didn't know Zenaida was a real name. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a name that's more common than I thought. I mean, I always thought it was like a really unique name. I mean, because like the odds of this, right? And the odds of it also happening at the same apartment complex. There's a Zenaida Gonzalez who did go to the Sawgrass. Wow. I'll read it again. I called Zenaida Gonzalez, identified from the Sawgrass Apartments. She was open and responsive, and when asked, denied knowing Casey, Caylee, or babysitting for anyone at all. She agreed to meet with an investigator to give a sworn statement. Orange County Sheriff's Office missing persons investigator Wilda McBride and some other people met with Zenaida within 2 hours of this call. The investigator showed Zenaida photos of Casey and Caylee. Zenaida claimed she did not know either one. She voluntarily completed a sworn statement affidavit. Incredible. So this I don't think needs to go on the sheet, but this is just interesting. So I'm gonna, well, actually, I should add it to the sheet, but on the part where I mentioned the that she existed in the first place. Wow. Okay, so here we go. So later, detectives meet with her. And she provides a sworn statement that she, or the H's keep getting stuck, has never met Casey or Caylee. Wow. That's just mind-boggling to me. What are the fucking odds of that? Weird. Very weird. Very weird. I don't know. It's weird. Okay. Why is this tabbed now? What the heck? Why? What is happening? Hold on. I don't understand sometimes what happens with things. Okay. So once back in the Universal parking lot, Sergeant Allen pulled up the Zenaida Gonzalez's in the state's driver and information database system, aka David. Casey was shown several photos of Zenaida Gonzalez within the same age range. I don't know why he's putting making this possessive. These should be plural but not possessive. So please ignore Detective Melich's inclusion of the apostrophe. She did not identify any of them as the Zenaida in question. Sergeant Allen pulled up the photo of the Zenaida I just spoke with, and Casey said she also didn't recognize her, saying she's too old. Casey then accompanied Sergeant Allen and Detective Wells back to our central operations building. During the course of the investigation during that day, I received calls from several persons who know Casey. Interesting. All claim she's a habitual liar and has been known to steal from friends in the past. Below is a synopsis of what each individual told me and would later give sworn statements about. Interesting. So here's the bit from Amy Huizenga. Now, this did not come in at trial, but it did come up outside the presence of the jury. Okay, so it came up in the trial, in other words, that we saw. Like we've seen and heard whiffs of this because it was discussed outside the presence of the jury, but the jury doesn't know about this. So Amy Huizenga was the person who told Casey's mother where Casey would be found. She claimed that Casey, well, all that we know, but this is the part about she stole some checks and approximately $700. Yeah. So she cashed those checks or whatever. So that happened. Anthony Lazaro called me claiming he first learned of Caylee's disappearance when deputies came to his house. And yeah, all this came in. He claimed he met Casey in May, blah, blah. He has never met Zenaida nor knows where she lives. It was he that contacted Amy Huizenga and had her call me regarding this case. Anthony said while Casey lived with her since around June 9th, she mentioned several times that Caylee's with the nanny at Disney or at Universal Studios or at the beach. She never gave him any indication that child was needed or missing. Here's what's interesting. Well, let me read another statement and then I'll mention what I was going to say. Jesse Grund is a friend of Casey's. Casey's mother mentioned him as the one who took Casey to a hospital earlier in the year for a seizure. He called me before I could call him. He mentioned that Casey is a habitual liar. He told me that on June 25th, he received a call from Casey who was trying to cheer him up over a recent job loss. She told him she was free this weekend if he wanted to get together. They used to date. And apparently they had this did not end well. Like, we have heard whiffs about this being like not a good breakup, via the jail phone calls and stuff like that. She said that Caylee was with the nanny and that they'd gone to the beach for the weekend. After learning of this incident, he immediately called me, let me know this and how it contradicted with what Casey had been telling everyone. Christine Chester, a friend of Casey, called after seeing the missing person story of Caylee on the news. She claimed to be Casey's best friend. Now, we have not heard from her in the trial. However, we have heard her voice because in one of those first jail calls, not the video jail calls, but the just audio jail calls, Lee calls her and is with this Christine, and we hear Christine on the phone, but she's another one who's not been hasn't testified yet. She claimed to be Casey's best friend. She also said Casey and Caylee had been to her house and all gone for a walk on either June 12th, 13th, or 14th. She was sure of the date. I think that's supposed to say wasn't sure. She was surprised to hear of the child missing. Once at our central operations center, and after I started receiving the above phone calls, referenced Casey and her child, Casey was given another opportunity to change. There's a lot of typos in here. I think this is supposed to say opportunity to change or provide a statement or information that would help her find her child. She did not. She was then placed under arrest for neglect. All right. She was then placed under arrest for child neglect and providing false information to us regarding this investigation. So that's her initial arrest. So let me correct something on my sheet, because it looks like initially then they were looking at child neglect and then they upgraded it because they were like, no, we're not overcharging, we're undercharging. Incredible. So I'm going to change this basis for the initial. I'll put initial child neglect charge. Okay. Basis for the initial child neglect charge. And I'll put later upgraded. Hold on. Later upgraded to aggravated child abuse. Okay. But period here. Okay. As I was preparing for my charging, or as I was preparing my charging affidavit on Casey, I asked Detective Charity Beasley to go to the house and recover the defendant's car and some other items Casey had used to include a laptop computer. Speaking of the computers, guys, on the next episode, we're going to get into all of the Google searches. I instructed her to try and collect everything that had been in the car at the time it was picked up from Johnson's wrecker. I called George Anthony and got his approval to take these items prior to sending Detective Beasley to the house. Once at the house, she placed evidence tape on the doors and trunk, blah, blah, blah. There's the license plate, etc. Everything that we know what was inside the car. George Anthony completed a statement affidavit allowing us to, quote, search and provide any evidence to help bring back my granddaughter, Caylee, end quote. Of course. This motherfucker. Dude, I cannot. This statement also has not come in the trial. Which is interesting because it's not hearsay, because it is a sworn statement, right? Like, this would count. Like, that's the point of a sworn affidavit, right? Like, it can come in at trial. It's not hearsay. All right, so let me add this on my list because that's fascinating. So I don't know why there's a tab here. It's going to drive me crazy. The formatting is stupid. While detectives are retrieving the Pontiac Sunfire from the home, good old George, he's always willing to throw his daughter under the bus, that one, provides allowing us to search. Okay. George provides an affidavit, and I need to get this verbatim. Now here, it's supposed to say any, but it says an. I'm going to edit that to make it any. I think it's a typo. Search and provide any evidence to help bring back my granddaughter, Caylee. Search and provide any evidence to help bring back my granddaughter, Caylee. Provides an affidavit allowing them I don't know why. There's a tab here. It's just crazy. What happens if I do this? Oh gosh. No. No. Oh no. Why? Oh no. Can I just do this manually? Y'all. Oh my God. Oh, Microsoft Word, you silly head. No, I don't want you to start the numbers over, please. All right, it's going to have a tab there. I have no idea why. Don't ask. All right. The Anthonys also handed over a compact laptop computer, which, though owned by them, was primarily used by Casey. Detective Beasley also recovered several miscellaneous items, including a baby doll, drawer, the Explorer backpack, child's toothbrush, some other shit. Detective Beasley relayed to him that Cindy had washed a pair of pants found in the car, as well as the defendant's clothing recovered by Lee Anthony from Tony Lazzaro's house. While on the phone with George, fucking hell, George again, right? While on the phone with George for the above request, I asked if he would be able to show us where he had thrown the trash out. Well, he didn't throw the trash out, according to the testimony. It was the dude from the record place. George said he'd be willing to show someone where this was. I instructed a Wilder McBride to meet him, and then they went, and we just heard about this just on a recent episode, actually. The trash bag was photographed and collected and then brought back to the forensics bay for examination. Interesting that Detective Melich was under the impression that George threw the trash out, because they made it really clear. Makes me wonder what's going on there, because the state tried to make it really clear that it was not George that threw the trash out. Once the car arrived at our forensics bay, Sergeant John Allen and I met with crime scene investigator Gerard Bloisy to inspect the car and investigate the smell. How do you even... Okay. George and Cindy noticed that when they picked up the car... investigate a smell that George and Cindy had noticed when they picked up the car. Upon opening the driver's side door, we noticed the strong smell of decomposition. Again, notice it doesn't say human decomposition. That's something that they point out all the time whenever they're doing the smell credibility with witness testimony, right? And they've got someone talking about decomposition. It's like, oh, I noticed you didn't say human, right? Strong smell of decomposition coming from the inside of the car. Based on my experience as a law enforcement officer, to include the last 2 years where I was assigned to the homicide unit, here again, I strongly believe that the odor appeared to be that of decomposition. You already said that. That's an interesting statement, because I thought here maybe would be the time to say human, but he doesn't. He just says decomposition. Once investigator McBride arrived with the trash bag, CSI Bloisy emptied the bag's contents to see what was inside. Although there were food items inside as well as small flies and maggots, the smell from the trash was distinctly different from the smell coming from within the car. The trash did not smell like the inside of the car, but the odor of decomposition did carry over to the trash bag. Note that the trash bag contained a pizza box, but no pizza. Noted. Over the course of the next several weeks, they continued to try to locate Caylee and Zenaida. See supplemental reports documented under the original Orange County Sheriff's Office child neglect report case. As of this writing, there is still no one aside from Casey herself who ever saw or spoke with the nanny. A search warrant was executed on the laptop to see if there was anything that could help them find Caylee. Investigation into the laptop showed there were photos of Caylee with an elderly male. Now, we know that's her grandfather, taken on June 15th. This is when they are able to establish that date, the discrepancy in the date. This is a full week after Casey and her mother. So it's interesting that both Casey and her mom, like, we know Casey had said June 9th, but it's interesting that Cindy also thought it was June 9th. Like, they separately gave the same date as to when they last saw Caylee. And what are the odds of that too, right? Like, that they could both be wrong, but with the same date. I don't know. That's weird. Casey's first outgoing jail call was to her mother's house. In the call, Casey was upset with her mother and only wanted to get Tony's number. Casey began the call by not being Again, this is just so disgusting. Casey began the call not by being upset at having been arrested for child neglect, but by telling Cindy she'd seen her cameo on television. Apparently, he thinks this is relevant to the murder charge. I would say, if you didn't think you did anything wrong, like, there's two ways it could go, right? If you're innocent, you're arrested for something, right? it's hard to say. And this is why people shouldn't do the thing of like, well, what would a normal person do, right? Because it would be totally normal or plausible in my view to be upset, right? But also, if you're someone who your MO, like your general, the way that you handle things is in a not heightened emotional, like again, how many times have they commented thus far in this report that she's not been showing emotion, right? And even we see it in the jail calls. That's another thing, right? In the jail call video things, that her parents show up, right? And they're like, okay, you need to be positive, keep your chin up, keep smiling, don't cry. And meanwhile, she's like, yeah, I am, I'm being positive. And then Cindy is crying and Casey's the one comforting her. Yeah. When you think about her, everything that we see from her and this whole thing with the family dynamic and just her personality, and you imagine, okay, if she was innocent, what would her reaction be? Well, then not being upset about being arrested for child neglect actually tracks with her personality, especially the sense that she kept thinking she was going to be going home. Now, that is also something that you would think if you are innocent, right? So, but I have to add this to my list because it seems like something that is important to their investigation, sadly. All right. When making her first jail call, Caylee doesn't sound upset. Sorry, Casey. It's so easy to get them confused. Casey doesn't sound upset about being arrested for child neglect. Sad. And again, the phone call that we've already heard that, so I'm not going to go over it. But this is the phone call. And then remember, I just referenced Christina, her friend. There's the Christina, right? So this is the phone call I was referencing where she talks to her friend Christina, who weirdly hasn't testified at trial. Maybe she'll be called by the defense. Casey told Christina that she left Caylee with Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She also said the police should check New York and North Carolina for her. So then they get a court order for Casey's cell phone. They don't find any numbers belonging to the imaginary people. So then they're referencing here this private phone call, right? Where Casey says that somebody calls her and says they have Caylee. As to the private phone call received on July 15th around 1200 hours where Casey claims to have spoken with Caylee, there is an incoming call at 11:35 hours from Jamie Realander, which lasted approximately 23 minutes. And she testified. She was one of the first witnesses, I think, actually. Canine, oh, look at this. Speaking of last episode here, Canine Deputy Jason Forgy and his cadaver dog Garrus responded to the Orange County Sheriff's Office forensic storage bay at my request. I asked Deputy Forgy if he and his partner could conduct a cadaver search on the car. Deputy Forgy said it could be done. Deputy Forgy's cadaver dog is trained to detect an alert on the scent of human decomposition and not on any other biological decomposition. Deputy Forgy gave his canine Garrus his cadaver search command. He started his search and gave a final trained alert at the rear passenger fender trunk, and that's what we heard about in the last episode. Detectives Appy Wells, Dave Clark, and Kevin Kravitz, and I met with Anthony Lobzaro and his roommate. They gave us consent to search their apartment, and they also obtained recorded statements about what they knew. Detective Pedro Rivera obtained sworn audio recorded statements from Danny Colamorino. Danny is the owner of Cast Iron Tattoos. We've not heard from him yet. I don't know if we will. This might not come in for very obvious reasons from what I understand here. Casey had been a customer of Cast Iron Tattoos for approximately 1.5 to 2 years. and regularly visits the establishment. Danny last saw Caylee at Cast Iron Tattoos on July 15th. Caylee scheduled an appointment for Saturday, July 19th for her and an unidentified friend to get a tattoo. Caylee had a tattoo done on July 2nd or 3rd. The tattoo had the words Bella Vita on her shoulder blade. Bella Vita is Italian for beautiful life. So this is where I'm sure it was like a 403 analysis. And this is, I mean, it hasn't come in yet, and I would imagine it's not going to for that reason. So, but I'm going to put this on the list because, again, even though this isn't, they think this is important. They think this is an indication of guilt or murder, which is, I don't know. I don't get it. So July 2nd or 3rd. All right, put this on my list. So this is all the things, right? When we look at what is their basis, what is the whole thing? Why did they arrest her? Why did they charge her? What is their we're outlining all of it here in this Word document. This is what they based their decision on. Caylee had a Bella Vita. And I should capitalize this correctly. Caylee arrived at the parlor in a maroon or faded red. I think that's Amy Huizenga's car. Faded red four-door car. Caylee mentioned the car belongs to a friend. She told him that she borrowed it. Yes, so that is Amy Huizenga's car. She borrowed it to pick up the friends from the airport, flying in from Puerto Rico. Yep. Caylee could not fit her friend's luggage in her own car. Caylee claimed she was supposed to go to Puerto Rico to with her friends, wasn't able to due to financial reasons. I received a call on this date, July 17th, from Melissa England. Are you saying you wrote this report on the 17th? Hold on. Well, we'll see. Melissa England, friend of Troy Brown. She was in town, blah, blah. We heard from these people. Again, these were some of these earlier on witnesses where it's like, what is the state doing? This is where it was so reminiscent of Karen Reed, where it's like, these people, yeah, we met her once and she didn't seem worried about her daughter. I was like, okay, like one after another. Anyway, Melissa said that over the summer. So so Melissa England, right, didn't know her, spent a few hours with her. Melissa said that over the several hours she spent with Caylee on July 3rd, Caylee hardly mentioned. She did mention it, but she hardly mentioned it, that she had a child. Melissa found this odd. Again, this is included in this report as in this acquaintance's opinion, and it's doesn't even seem rational to me. If you're strangers and you spend a couple hours together, she did mention she had a child, but she hardly mentioned it. Didn't mention it enough, apparently, for Melissa's opinion, and now it makes it into this report. Incredible. July 2nd. Caylee meets Melissa England on July 3rd. They spent a couple hours together, during which time Caylee, and I'm going to quote it here verbatim, hardly mentioned she had a child. which Melissa found odd. On July 21st, Sergeant Allen and I met with George and Cindy at their residence. I showed them a printout of the photos they claimed were taken on June 9th. I showed them the photos were in fact taken on June 15th. Right, that's when they visited the grandfather. They were unsure if the date was correct, but being this was Father's Day, they agreed that it may be. While at the house, we also asked for and collected several toothbrushes, a hairbrush, a comb, and an oral thermometer. It is interesting about the date because, going back to the whole thing about the fact that Casey and her mom both gave the same wrong date. I was just thinking about this because it came up in the last episode about the cameras, and while they were talking about Ricardo Morales's camera, right? But it's interesting because they were just talking about the timestamps, right? And how the fact that there's a timestamp on the photo, it's the timestamp on the photo comes from the camera. And if that's not set correctly, it could be wrong. It's interesting because that makes me wonder, and I don't know that they've gotten into this. Interesting. Like, in other words, is it possible, right, that like that camera had was a week off, right, and dated that picture the 15th, but it really was the 9th? Okay, well, we'll table that thought. Also on July 21st, I obtained and executed a search warrant for epithelial and hair standards in Casey. Again, love this right here. I'm being sarcastic. Seaside Christine Narkowitz assisted us in collecting buccal and hair samples. Casey still showed no signs of emotion at our presence. That means she's guilty, I guess. Oh, she voluntarily complied with the search warrant. It's just so disgusting and sad. Why won't it let me highlight anymore? I just want it to highlight, though. I don't know why it does the squares sometimes. Okay. July 21st. They collect hair and buccal samples. Okay. So let me put this on my list. CSI obtains, what do they call it exactly again here? Hair and buccal samples during which time, and as y'all know, I'm going to quote it verbatim. Casey still showed no signs of emotion at our presence. Casey still showed no signs of emotion at our presence. You know, another thing, obviously, right? But just because she's not showing signs of emotion doesn't mean she's not having emotions, right? Some people don't show their emotions, or they show them. Anyway, she voluntarily complied with the search warrant. Also on July 22nd, Detective Kravitz confirmed that Cynthia and Caylee had visited her father on June 15th. Oh, okay. So they did verify that. And the date on the photos mentioned above was correct. Okay. There's a supplemental report. Interesting. On July 24th, Detective Gerald White met with and conducted an audio recorded interview with witness Simon Birch. Aha, yes, Johnson's wrecker. There's a high turnover of cars in the lot. A lot of this is like just what we heard from his testimony. Now here we're going to get more about this interaction with George and Cindy. Remember, because we know that they were really upset. So Simon was working at Johnson's wrecker. He was summoned by witness Nicole Lett. Nicole was working in the front office of the tow yard and was dealing with two upset customers, George and Cindy. Simon met with George and Cindy. Cindy was upset with the cost of the tow, the length of the time the car was stored, and requested a discount. Simon explained the cost of the tow and storage fees and explained the notification process to Cindy and George. George agreed to pay for the release of the white Pontiac. He provided the white Pontiac's title and his driver license as proof of ownership. Simon took George to the tow yard to get the car. As they walked, George mentioned his daughter had been missing for a while. She would not allow him to see his granddaughter and has told him several lies. When they reached the white Pontiac, George used a key to unlock the white Pontiac's driver's side door. When the door opened, a very foul odor came from inside of the white Pontiac. Simon immediately recognized the odor as the same odor he smelled in a car stored in the lot in which the man committed suicide inside. The man was reported to have remained deceased inside the car for approximately 5 days. The smell from the white Pontiac was not as strong as the other car. Interesting. Simon stated, "That's rotten." George did not reply. That's interesting because I think that in trial, this did not come out like that. Like there just wasn't mentioned. That's interesting. George did not reply. George and Simon went to the white Pontiac's trunk in an attempt to locate the source of the odor. George opened the trunk and he and Simon observed a white garbage bag inside of the trunk. Flies also came out of the trunk. Simon opened the garbage bag. And remember, I'm just remembering too here, like George's testimony around this whole event with this, when he first appeared, supposedly, right, if he first gets a whiff of the smell and then they go around and they get the garbage bag from the trunk. His testimony about this is a complete utter mess. He was a mess on the stand with this. Like it was a disaster. Yeah. So, George opened the trunk and he and Simon observed a white trash bag. Flies came out of the trunk. Interesting. That did not come out in the testimony. That did not come out. In fact, there was a lack of bugs, they said. Simon opened the garbage bag and observed several papers, feedback box, and maggots. I thought they said they didn't see any maggots. Simon threw the garbage bag over a fence near the tow lot's dumpster. This is the same garbage bag collected by investigator McBride. Okay, so guys, actually, I just looked over. So my dog, Frodo, I think needs to go outside. Let me do this. I am going to, I guess I'll end this stream just so that it's not dead air, and then I'll just come back for part 2 here in just a couple minutes. So just bear with me, and I'll be back for part 2 here in just a couple minutes. I'm just going to go take care of him, and I'll be back in just a second.